This video is about violence, and violence is often so reflexive and so rapid that we don't go into the nuances. And unfortunately, our culture is not only paradoxical and or hypocritical, as in just say no or don't be violent or get them back, or you can't be violent, but we can go bully other countries. It's a very bizarre situation. So the first thing that I want to dwell on is the chauvinism of what's called violence in most cases. Now, chauvinism is the overemphasis of the masculine and the underemphasis of the feminine. And in most systems of thought, the physical body is more masculine in relationship to the heart, which is more feminine. And I begin with this emphasis because there is an enormous amount of cruelty that is directed at the human heart and is overlooked in a chauvinistic culture as long as it's not physical. So you have, the chauvinism in the Harry Potter movies, where what's Malfoy doing? He's taunting Harry about his dead parents. Now, if we understand that stepping aside from the chauvinism of our culture, that pain is pain, that you can induce mental pain, that you can induce physical pain, that you can induce emotional pain, that they all scar, that you can create a traumatic emotional wound or mental wound that lasts a long time, that can heal more slowly than a bone, that is as disabling as being beaten. If we look at the reality rather than the chauvinism says things like sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Me being defined in this case as a body. Now, to look at the humor in this chauvinism, we just have to imagine a vegetable, or in this term, a body that has no thought, consciousness, and feeling. So a vegetable is a body, as we refer to it, that's laying there unconscious in a coma. And the question is, would you like to be a vegetable? Because when you say sticks and stones can can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, what you're saying is words can never hurt that vegetable. So if you identify as a vegetable, that your thoughts and your feelings, your consciousness has no meaning to you whatsoever, it's much more efficient to be a vegetable. People will actually take care of you. You won't have to pay rent, and sticks and stones, aren't theirs in most cases. Maybe you'll be raped in this kind of culture with the healthcare we have, but so there's also a little bit of illogic here, because most people, if you think about it, being a vegetable is a pretty horrific thought. Just laying there, having people bathe you, wash you, how do you manage to go to the toilet? And yes, an insult does not hurt a vegetable, but it hurts a human being. A human being is more than a vegetable. A human being has thoughts, and thoughts are influenced by other thoughts. Hey! All I have to do is any kind of symbol, and your thoughts follow my gesture, my question. What's going on? What was that about? You are influenced by thought. You are influenced by body. you are influenced by emotion. If you see a deep feeling on my face, you have mirror neurons that evoke, if you are not in a sociopathic state, that evoke those kinds of feelings in you as well. So it is not only technically inaccurate, but it is one of the many expressions of chauvinism in our culture to say that, for example, because Harry, the reason that Malfoy will provoke Harry is that he's there in a chauvinistic environment. It's wonderful how chauvinism gets transported and imported into fantasy because it's so deeply ingrained in ourselves. Because in Hogwarts as well, if Harry responds with a shout, more violent, or tries to punch Malfoy for insulting his parents, one of the deepest wounds, when you've got abandonment trauma, this, that, and the other, helplessness and all that, to taunt in that area. It is Harry who gets punished because in a chauvinistic culture, the words and the emotions are not of interest to a teacher because that's more feminine, right? That's just your feelings, right? That's just your feminine side. And if you don't understand the psychology that every man and every woman has a masculine and a feminine side, chauvinism says that half of us inside each one of us is less valuable than the other half. Well, this is not scientifically correct. Try and find a scientist that will cut an apple in half and say that this half is better than this half, or a baby in half and say that this half, which is now dead because it's cut in half, is better than this other half, which is also dead and equally needed to function. Now, you can find cultural artifices, such as a school, that will overdevelop the left brain or lineal logical brain and ignore the right brain, because that's also part of chauvinism. In other words, chauvinism is not scientific, it is cultural. And in this expression of chauvinism, emotional pain, mental pain is ignored, is overlooked, is minimized, is discounted, is shamed. You should get over this. You see, we're beyond that level of chauvinism when it comes to the body. Only an idiot these days, or our culture has advanced to a point. We used to shame people for having physical maladies. We used to live in cultures where babies that were born deformed were not wanted by God, were cursed by God, and so they were murdered. That's one example. As you take it to the extreme, you have pain and you are murdered. Sounds pretty sociopathic to me. This is still done in some situations where a mother, has 3 days in certain tribes to assess the health of their baby, and they will murder the baby if it's not in good health within 3 days. We also, of course, still have the chauvinism that if it is not a girl, particularly in China with the one-child policy, tens of thousands, if not millions, of girls murdered in the chauvinism that the man is more valuable. Now, the point is, every one of these are cultural artifices. They are not technical. There's no scientist that's going to say that the chicken is more valuable than the egg, or the egg more valuable than the chicken. It's a cycle of life. There's no scientist that's done his research that's going to say a woman is more or less valuable than a man. If anything, if you had to start with one, start with a woman who's pregnant. A man isn't. And of course, when every man comes from a woman, it just gets a little silly. But the question is, and what we're exploring is, how silly does it get, one? And why are we so attached to this absurdity? And specifically, how does it translate to violence? Now, one of the things that we know from Gary Slutkin's work as an epidemiologist is that violence is an epidemic. Literally, meaning it follows the laws of a dis-ease. And pain is an epidemic. Now, you can look at the epidemiology and the transference of emotion and things like This American Life. No, This Emotional Life. It's a PBS series. It references one of the few accidental. It's always an accidental study that studies emotions on a large cultural scale, because we are so chauvinistic, it doesn't even occur to us that there could be any value in doing a long-term study about feelings. So this study was done accidentally. We do accidental science when it comes to the feminine. That's how absurd we are. And is there any, there's humor around this, the absurdity, the lack of, if you saw someone at a gym, and in fact, if you saw an entire world at a gym, and they were building all their right side of their body up, and you notice their left side is not doing anything at all. You see these big muscles, men and women both, bicep, all this stuff, and the left side, isn't doing anything. It's laughable. It's a joke. And you say to them, what about your left side? Oh, that's not important. Well, how do you figure that? Well, look at my right side. Oh, I've got to spend all my energy there. That's what's important. It's like, so do you try running a marathon with your skimpy little underdeveloped, left side? You think you're going to win a boxing match against even an average person who isn't doing all this weightlifting, who has both sides of their body? There's no science. And this is the joke, and the joke is on us. We do it in school. We do it around violence. We do it with men and women. We do it around dominance, where in any polarity, basically, you have the masculine and feminine, giving and receiving. Oh, the giver is more important and more powerful. Okay, so try giving without someone receiving. The man is more important. It's a joke. You cannot have one without the other. A polarity, by definition, is integrated. The transaction requires both sides of the pole. Try having a battery. Cut a battery in half and say, I just want the positive pole and no negative pole. Okay, you don't get anything. Okay, let's underdevelop the negative pole. Let's have 20% negative pole, 80% positive pole. Okay, you get 20%. It's absurd. Now, I mention this just because our chauvinism is so ingrained that we don't see it. And it leads directly to this blind spot around violence. So violence is an epidemic, literally. It's a disease. Pain is an epidemic, literally. And they go hand in hand. Pain, shame, fear, violence go hand in hand. Now, one of the ways to look at them is connected with the fight, flight, freeze traumatic mechanism. Now, shame is a trauma because as pack animals, when we are excluded from the pack, literally we're 100,000 years out of the trees, basically, is a good way to look at it. And if you look at monkeys' behaviors in a predatory situation, They survive with alerting each other, protecting each other, keeping lookouts and stuff, and keeping each other safe. Um, Monkeys also need companionship, grooming, sex, sleep, etc. And you can't sleep when you're all alone. You've got to keep, high alerts out in the wild. And so there's a lot that being in a pack offers a mammalian monkey. And we have that biology. It's like 99% of our genes. We have a lot of that biology. And it doesn't just vanish because we've decided to be independent. This again is a human artifice because you don't see monkeys going around saying, I'm independent. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. The monkeys understand that the synergy of being in a group is so strong that if the group starts moving here, the monkey moves over there with them. He doesn't say, I'm independent, I have the right to die alone, on my own, etc. And it's much more it's much more efficient. For example, monkeys are grooming themselves, massaging themselves, having sex and all that. It's quite remarkable how much monkeys do better than humans. I mean, they have more sleep without having to pay rent. They have more sex without having to, go through the long litany of being attractive. They eat healthy organic food. Don't have to buy it. They play around together. They have lots of time, lots of free time. They're in great physical condition, always moving around, jumping around, playing. So they're playing. They don't have a job that they have to go to with a boss they don't like. They've got it made. And we think we're so superior, coming 100,000 down, so we don't, we're out of the trees, we're not as fit, we're don't have as much sex as a statistic. We don't sleep as well in the West as a statistic. It's like, and we're rushing around in this rat race that monkeys aren't in. So, in the chauvinism, of course, the overdeveloped left brain points at the fact that we are superior to all of the species. Where's the data? On what metric? Are monkeys destroying the planet? No. Is a superior sign of intelligence that you destroy your host body? Is that the metric of intelligence? Is it the fact that we worry more than monkeys? Is that the metric? Is it the fact that we're depressed, 20%? Is it the fact that we commit suicide and monkeys don't seem to be suffering badly enough to want to commit suicide as a somewhat leading cause of death? More than 50,000 actually do it, which then leads to hundreds of thousands of attempts, which leads to millions and millions of people thinking about it. There's a bell curve around enormous pain that somehow the monkeys jumping from branch to branch fit without any rent, without any jobs, without having to get a higher form of delusion known as education. They don't seem to be disturbed by any of that. And they have figured out that destroying their planet is a bad idea, so they don't get around to it. Eating plants with chemicals, they don't get around to that either. It's like what exactly is this phenomena of higher awareness? So, but pain is a virus. Pain comes back and forth as a virus. And what happens basically is if you hurt someone, there is a higher chance they will hurt you back. You're sitting next to your wife and you say, gee, you're getting awfully fat. Couldn't you eat less? Da 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 da. Now, the probability statistically that she is going to do something to hurt you. Now, it can show up in any different way. See, this is the thing. So you say, she's fat, da-da-da-da-da. She feels hurt, angry, shame, smaller, bitter, scared, whatever it is. And then you want to have sex. She's not interested. Now you feel hurt, like, what's wrong with me? Why, da, 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 da. It moves back and forth. Pain is viral in nature. Now, the heart, mind, and body are also integrated. And one of the ways that you can predict violence is if physical violence, because it's all violent. What I want to transfer is this, is to evolve a complexity where we understand that the inducement of pain is a violation of the principle of well-being, that the inducement of pain is a principle in well-being, one. And two, that when you induce pain emotionally, that cannot be healed emotionally for whatever reason, there's a high probability it will transfer over to physicality. So again, we see Malfoy giving Harry a wound about his parents who died protecting him. And that's a pretty sacred energy. That's pretty high in psychology in terms of all the different quadrants one can create. One's parents, who one misses terribly, and who died protecting you. This is a very sacred. Their sacrifice, that's what makes something sacred. When someone gives their life to protect something, you have that. When you give money, it is a sacrifice to help someone. That's what makes something sacred. We know that this is sacred when someone will sacrifice something. I give some of my power to you. I give some of my money to you. I give some of my time for you. I give my life for this cause, for this reason. That's what makes it sacred. That's how we know what people value. Follow the money. Follow the time. Follow the sacrifice. And you will understand the hierarchy of values in a culture and an individual. So this is pretty high. And it's high for Harry because, he'd give anything, as he will say, to spend some time with his parents and this and that and the other. And so to insult, to bring in ugliness and pain and shame and dishonor and disrespect to this sacred terrain is to inflict extraordinary levels of pain systematically with intentional cruelty. So Malfoy is deliberately trying to hurt Harry in as deep a way as he possibly can. Now, if Harry punches Malfoy for 5 minutes in the face and breaks his nose, he's probably not going to hurt Malfoy as deeply. Meaning, most of us, if we were, would end up feeling less pain overall, if you actually value the feminine enough to count the emotional pain, which is a little bit dumb because every action is emotionally based, which means that chauvinism is emotionally based. And it works like this, basically. We have a hierarchy of needs. Maslow has beautifully elucidated. We have survival, we have security in our survival, and then we have the third need is to be loved and to belong. Now, this is such a strong need, this love and belonging, that people will behave unscientifically, that scientists will behave unscientifically, that women will behave unscientifically, that children will behave unscientifically, that everyone will abandon science in order to belong, because to be loved and belong, to fit in, is more important to survival at that level socially than to be scientific. Love and belonging is more important in science based on people's behavior. So you have scientists who are chauvinistic to meet their needs for love and belonging. Because when you have a culture that is chauvinistic, that overvalues the masculine and undervalues the feminine, to be loved and belong in that culture, you have to conform to the imbalance, to the irrationality, to the absurdity. And so scientists conform to this. Scientists conform to this by not studying emotions as much as they study things, when this is not rational. If you look at human experience right now, and take, for example, the 20% of Americans that are depressed right now. Right now, as we speak, millions and millions of Americans are depressed. And almost no money or study is being done to do this. Now, is this rational? Because if you look at the economy, for example, hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost in the economy. Hundreds of billions. Do you get that? Billions? That America would literally have a few $100 billion more money if suddenly depression was eradicated. Now, then you look at how many people are getting $1 million to study all of the ways to cure depression. When I say all of the ways, yes, there are lots of drug companies spending $1 million, not a lot, but a few. So let's say we have a $200 billion problem a year. What's it worth to you to solve that problem? If you're getting a bill, if you're getting a phone bill, you get a cell phone bill of $200 billion a year. That's your cell phone bill. And all you have to spend is $1 billion to figure it out. Is it worth saving $199 billion if you would just switch over to this other carrier? You betcha, because you're a chauvinist and you value money, and no one's going to steal your money, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so you've switched carriers, you've saved $199 billion. Okay, great, good for you. Now here's the joke. Because we're dealing with something feminine, because emotions are, see, here's how the link goes. We create hostility towards the feminine. We create pain towards the feminine in both men and women. We create cruelty without repair. We create invisibility without honor. We create a massively hostile and toxic relationship or environment for the feminine self in men and women. And it's painful. And then we say, don't talk about it, because that's only the feminine, which is more painful. Because you realize that the only reason I'm not talking about this, because if I had a flat tire, I'd be talking about this. But the flat tire is not as debilitating as exhaustion or depression, but I shouldn't talk about that. That's not cool. You come back to this dumb idea that, if someone bangs your your hand with a hammer and fractures all the bones, and then the group watching this says, okay, get back to work and drive a bicycle. Anyone who's sane in our cult will say, no, you idiots, you can't ride a bicycle with a broken hand, you idiots. Shame on you. But what we do is we take parts of our heart, part of our feminine self, and we hammer it and bash it and do not give it treatment. And so it gets infested and infected. And then we don't give that treatment. And then we say, hey, go off and be positive and make that sale and work harder. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I can't, pick up the phone. We hide it, because this is what you do in an unscientific cult. You hide the actual reality in front of your face. So we're chauvinistic. We're dumb. We're idiots. And we're too idiotic to know it. And it's not even that true, because if you ask someone, see, now what we have is a dual cultural identity, where you tell your real friend who's told you what's hurting and stuff, and everyone else, everything's great. How are you? I'm fine. A lie. I'm great. I'm fine. Da da da. But we tell your one or two real friends. Oh, I'm tired. I don't know what to do here. And so we have two realities. And the question is, why do you have two realities? We have two realities because we don't want to deal with the reality of the feminine. Now, this creates enormous pain. Now, when you show continued insensitivity to pain, it grows. When pain reaches a certain threshold of trauma and or overwhelm, it spills out into physicality. You humiliate someone about his sister, you then tell them to be, cheerful, then you be hypocritical, you steal some of their money, and then you run in and shove them as if, they don't exist, which is the message basically is you don't exist emotionally, you don't exist, you don't exist, you don't exist, and then you shove, that's the person that's going to punch you in the nose because they've had it, you see. And so we do actually understand this. We're not complete idiots. It's just the scientists who don't want to be viewed as less than do not study feminine issues because in a chauvinistic culture where the game is slanted, it's not a fair playing field. In a fair playing field, feelings, which is a human awareness and experience, get studied with the same validity and understanding as physical sensations. Emotion. See, we don't even understand they're the same thing. Do you realize that there's not a single feeling that any human has ever felt that has not changed their body? So what's to say it isn't a physical sensation? What's to say that every emotion which we have is a chemical interaction in the body? So it really is all the same thing. So what's this absurdity that says we're going to study this part of the human body as an integrated system, but not this? What's to say that every thought is not reflected in the physical body? And so really, there's just one body, but we have the experience of heart, mind, and body. So could we just study the entire body? The entire body, including the chemicals that produce feelings, and including the chemicals and interactions that produce thoughts, or including the thoughts and feelings that create the chemicals. It's the same thing. You do not have one without the other. You literally, even if people are dreaming, you can watch brain activity. If you're watching brain activity, then it is the body. So what's this "it's all in your head" idea? If there is no head without the body, it doesn't make any sense. The whole thing collapses in an absurdity of cultural ignorance that scientists behave unscientifically in order to conform to. So anyway, we have this kind of little background thing going on here. But the question comes then, if we kind of understand all this, there's some pain that goes outward until it's met, right? So let's say you are Harry Potter and Malfoy hurts you around your parents. Is it a good idea to punch him? Now, you could do a couple of different things, but in a healthy culture, first of all, in a healthy culture, the game is about partnering to create high levels of well-being. This is not a healthy culture. And so there's many games going on. And one of them is, I'm angry and frustrated, so I want you to feel angry and frustrated so that I'm not alone in my anger and frustration, so that I don't feel there's something wrong with me, that I'm angry and frustrated, because that's what we do in this cult. We make people feel the majority of the pain, and then we leave them to feel that the reason there's this inequity in pain distribution is that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. Which is, of course, very aggravating when you say, well, your only fault was to be born with a poor family, and we don't value people who don't make this amount of income, and so your happiness means absolutely nothing to us as a cult. If you want to be meaningful, you have to make this amount of money. It's like, okay, so this will facilitate crime, of course. So there we see the transference of emotional pain. You're meaningless because you don't have this. We're not going to deal with the technical reality that it's very hard to go from the streets to having this amount of money. And we all need to feel loved and belonging. So when someone commits a crime and gets $100,000, one thing they're doing is meeting their need for love and belonging in a way that they can figure out how to do, because no one else is acknowledging the long gap and the statistical improbability of going from the streets to that $100,000, particularly in the face of racism and this, that, and the other. Now, here's a couple of little kind of succinct equations around violence. First of all, violation, to violate. What we're looking at is to invade, to insert, to transmit. And you can violate mentally, emotionally, physically. You can take someone in meditation and give them a slap on the back that violates the sanctity of their meditation. You can have someone's wish or boundary, and you can violate the boundary. They can be working in a state of flow on a book, and someone can walk in without knocking and shatter the chapter, where by the time you said, hey, how are you, good morning, do you want sugar in your coffee, the chapter is gone. That has been violated. Now, to someone who is in love with that book and the beauty and the intricacy of that book, that violation is 100 times worse than a slap in the face. Now, to someone who actually wants to be seen as a human being, that violation is also the awareness that someone who says they love you does not take the time or the presence to ask or observe or understand that a chapter is worth more than a slap in the face. And the pain of having love expressed as an unknocked entry into the sanctum of the writing room in order to offer an unwanted something. So we have violation upon violation upon violation. We have the violation of the ideal of love in which your partner actually knows you. We have the ideal of the masculine and feminine dance in which your partner takes the time and the initiative to know you rather than taking the time and initiative to make money or do this and not know you. Again, the outer masculine being honored more than the inner feminine in men and women. So when someone takes the initiative to tell you about themselves and then does not take the initiative to learn about you, and then takes the initiative to project what you should want because they might want that, and then doesn't take the initiative to ask, is this what you want? And then takes the initiative to invade the boundary based on that projection, and then does not take the initiative to observe the body language, to ask, and then says, I love you so much, here's your coffee that you don't want, and da-da-da-da-da, bye, and leaves. And all you're left with is the depression that a chapter is gone. You go back to the keypad and it's gone. This is a violation. That chapter has been taken by 5 levels of unconsciousness that is so invisible, so chauvinistic, and why would you possibly take the time to understand the other person's feelings when you, of course, know how it should be, that you don't even, that this is called love. In other words, that she's going to ask at the end of the day, wasn't that nice when I did that? And she's going to be upset if you actually tell the truth and say, no, it was the worst thing in my day, and it was a worse for 5 things. It tells me you don't know me. It tells me you're not taking initiative. It tells me you're clueless on my body language. It tells me you don't know what I like to drink. It tells me you weren't paying attention when I said don't disturb me. And it ruined my day. And because that chapter was sacred to me, I was sacrificing time and energy and thought to think and develop that chapter. It was sacred to me. I'm not sure that you're the person I want to spend my life with. How dare you? I brought you oranges, and you're still self-absorbed. This is the violation, and one leads to the other. The thought leads to the feeling leads to the action, and these thoughts and feelings, of course, lead to divorce when they are repeated. So there's this migration, thought, feeling, body, thought, feeling, body, body, thought, feeling, body, thought, feeling. It's always moving interconnectedly. And so when we see physical violence, slapping, punching, throwing things, there are a couple of things going on. One of them is that one partner is experiencing a violation emotionally that they cannot translate into language clearly enough for the other person to respect the boundary. So imagine if I punched you here and you didn't have the language to say, don't punch me there. Now, because we're a chauvinistic cult, we have not studied thoughts, feelings, and all this to the point where you would know, like, we're smart enough in a chauvinistic cult that if I'm punching you, everyone watching this, including you, knows that this is hurting me. We are not intelligent enough in a chauvinistic cult where people's feelings are not discussed, where we don't learn the map of feelings, where we do not learn what creates feelings. We are not smart enough to always know when we're punching someone emotionally. I remember a woman in a swimming pool that I was talking about how buoyant she was and how lovely it was, because that was my experience floating her in the swimming pool. And later she was furious at me because buoyant translated into fat, and then fat translated into insult in her mind. Not in my mind. I was just delighted at how buoyant she was, So buoyant equals fat, fat equals bad, bad equals unlovable and unsexy. And so in her mind, I was saying, you're not sexy, wow, you're just so not sexy. You see, but I didn't see the punch because she didn't share the wiring, because I didn't ask about the wiring, because in this cult, we don't make time to learn the emotional wiring. And so I'm punching her in the face, and there's a new level of chauvinism, of course, because she's not saying anything, because to say something would be to actually do something healthy and intelligent in a chauvinistic culture and say, ooh, Every time you say buoyant, I hear fat and unsexy. Is that what you mean? And whether you mean it or not, please don't say that. Great. Okay, good map. I'll stop punching you. So she was outraged later. And she violated me. Meaning when I said I need this, I'm not going to give you, you did, I see. So you've been punched. I didn't know I was punching you. And you didn't say anything, being the good chauvinist, because that would be unsexy too, to actually talk about feelings in a chauvinistic culture. And now it bursts out in a violation later, where I ask for something that's important to me, and you don't want to give it because you've been punched in the face and you didn't tell me, so I punched you a lot more because I didn't know. This is chauvinism, and the violation goes back and forth. So it happens when we lack the technology, the skill to turn mental emotional pain and stop it clearly enough so that it doesn't happen. And it happens when we do have the technology to do that and people keep doing it. I remember telling a partner, in Thailand, it's very popular to give people food. And so I would tell a partner, don't disturb me for an hour. And 10 minutes later, she'd knock and offer me some food. And I said, what don't you understand about not disturbing me for an hour? And she's like, well, I'm giving you food. I don't want it. I'm not hungry, but food didn't mean food. It meant that she was a good person. And so there's a cultural violation. And I felt more and more helpless, which was a violation, that I don't care what it is. I don't want it for the next hour. So we have violation, and then violation, and then violation. Now this escalated into, loud words, and I'm going off, I'm not coming back, and this is a violation. So this is how things, when you violate a thought, you also violate the emotions around that thought. When you violate a feeling, you violate the thoughts of what that feeling means in your world. When you violate the body, you also have feelings and thoughts about someone violating your body. This is an ecology. Now, in a culture that is as dense and chauvinistic as ours, it is useful to be mindful, it is useful to say, wow, this has escalated to physical violence. If you don't know what's going on, take space, get away. This is a good clue. If you can't get down because every time you open your mouth, you're hurting the other person. Remember that thing? What if I kept saying, but you are floaty? And she kept hearing, I am unsexy. This is not an equation that can be solved until you can unravel the thread and say, wait a minute, floaty does not mean unsexy in my book. And please stop making it mean that in your book. And yes, please, and could we unravel that? But this takes a technology that in a chauvinistic culture you and I don't learn in school, the technology of actually seeing through another person's eyes, physically, emotionally, and mentally, not just seeing the same thing physically and living in a completely different mental emotional world. Physical violence can be healthy. For example, if someone is hurting you emotionally and will not stop, and you have the ability to, like Malfoy's a coward, so you give him a good punch in the nose and he'll stop hurting you. He likes to do his hurting from a bullying point of view when he's got his 3 cronies and stuff like that. You give him a good punch in the nose. Now he's feeling a little bit of the pain that he's causing you. Is that a good idea? Like, what do you do when you've got a Malfoy that's trying to torment you emotionally? There's evidence to support that in some situations, physical assertion and aggression to say, not here. You don't get to do this, and you don't like it. Okay, there you go. You still don't like it. This is a boundary. This can be quite healthy. And the key thing that I wanted to explore is just the ways that it does not mean that, well, if you have one person in a relationship that is systematically humiliating, hurting, tormenting, and shaming the other person, and you have the other person that from time to time throws an object or breaks something or slaps them, this does not mean one person is more unhealthy than the other. In chauvinism, it does, because it's only the body that matters. It usually means that the dynamic would be better served if the person tormenting stopped than if the person throwing things stopped, particularly when the tormentor is actually looking for evidence that they have succeeded at tormenting you. By the time you throw a plate, you've now given them, okay, fine, I've reached my target. I was bored. I wanted to hurt and humiliate someone. I've succeeded. And then one of the reasons you've succeeded is that this culture will blame the person that threw the plate rather than the person doing the tormenting, which will then leave them feeling like, oh, I'm a plate thrower, da-da-da-da, while the other person slinks off and is quite happy and doesn't feel, and often feigns innocent. What? I just said your mother's a piece of shit, that's all I did, and you threw a plate. Oh, you're so unreasonable throwing plates. So there is an ecology. It's pretty equal. Mental and emotional pain, I don't think you can really say that you can't do more than the other, but in most cases, a punch or a slap is less painful than a deep psychological wound. And we need to learn to respect these areas of pain and awareness and understand our impact. And this is the responsibility of all of us. It's the responsibility of our culture, which is not doing its job, of our country, which is not doing its job, of our families, which are not doing their jobs, of our education systems, which are not doing their jobs, to bring awareness to what elicits pain. And what elicits pain in every individual is a gap between something that is sacred and desired and needed and the reality. When there's that gap, there's pain, and when it's a sustained gap, and when it's getting bigger, and when it's getting frustrated and hurt, there's pain. And if that pain is not addressed in collaboration, and if that pain is not honored in collaboration, it will escalate, and the pain will reciprocate. A person will only reach a certain level of pain before they either kill themselves or start hurting other people. And the reason for this is that we need to understand that we are ecologically connected. So if I'm in a ton of pain and you're not doing anything about it and you're participating in that pain, at some point I'm going to give that pain back to you. Now you're going to participate because in your self-centeredness, it's your pain. And if you will participate in a way that heals that pain for everyone, this will be a healthy movement. All right. See you later.